When a woman chooses solitude, she is making one of the most powerful decisions of her life. She is not running, not hiding, not retreating. She is stepping away to find something deeper. In that quiet space, she begins a journey that the world often overlooks, the journey inward. In solitude, she discovers her true strength. The noise of the world, expectations, opinions, pressures, fades into the background. What remains is her essence, raw and unfiltered. She faces herself, perhaps for the first time, without distraction, and in doing so, she begins to understand who she truly is. She realizes that her worth is not tied to the roles she plays or the validation she receives. It is inherent. It always has been. Solitude becomes the place where she forges that strength, turning doubts into determination and wounds into wisdom. This woman no longer fears being alone. In fact, she cherishes it. Solitude gives her the clarity she needs to reflect on her life, her choices, and her future. It helps her peel back the layers of societal noise and reconnect with her own truth. She no longer operates on autopilot, driven by what others expect. Instead, she starts to move with purpose. Every step she takes is deliberate. Every decision she makes is rooted in self-awareness. She is no longer lost in the chaos. She is grounded in her truth. And in that stillness, she finds her voice, the voice that may have been silenced or ignored for too long. She no longer has to speak to be heard or validated by others. She speaks because her truth is worth expressing. Her words, once tentative, are now strong and steady. She stands tall in her beliefs, unshaken by outside opinions. And that voice, born in solitude, becomes her greatest tool. It is a voice that carries the weight of reflection, experience, and authenticity. The loneliness could have consumed her, but she chose otherwise. She turned loneliness into power. She transformed it into a space for healing, for growth, for creating her own joy. She learned to find peace in her own company, to love the woman she sees in the mirror. She realized that fulfillment doesn't come from external sources, it comes from within, and with that understanding, she became unstoppable. But the power of solitude doesn't end with her. When she returns to the world, she carries that power with her. Her strength radiates in every interaction. Her clarity influences the way she lives and leads. Her voice inspires others to speak their truth. The transformation she experienced in solitude ripples outward, changing everything and everyone around her. A woman who has embraced solitude is a force to be reckoned with. She doesn't just survive, she thrives. She doesn't just exist, she commands her space. She has mastered the art of being whole on her own, and because of that, there is no limit to what she can achieve. So when a woman chooses solitude, understand this: she is choosing power. She is choosing transformation. She is choosing to become the woman she was always meant to be. And once she does, there is no turning back. When a woman chooses solitude, she steps into a place where her strength is forged in silence. It is in those quiet moments, away from the noise and chaos of the world, that she begins to uncover who she truly is. Solitude strips away the masks she's been conditioned to wear, revealing the raw, unfiltered power that has always existed within her. This is not about withdrawing in defeat. It's about choosing to retreat so she can fortify herself. In solitude, she learns to depend on her own inner resources, her thoughts, her creativity, her instincts. She becomes her own pillar, realizing she doesn't need external validation to feel worthy or complete. Every moment spent alone becomes an opportunity to cultivate her resilience. When challenges arise, she doesn't crumble because she has faced her doubts, her fears, and her insecurities head on, and in those moments of stillness, she has emerged stronger. Solitude also allows her to slow down and feel. In today's world, the pressure to be constantly connected, productive, and on display is suffocating, but solitude creates space for stillness, a space where she can listen to her intuition and recognize the truth that has always been waiting for her to hear. Her strength doesn't come from how loudly she shouts or how much she accomplishes. It comes from knowing who she is, knowing what she stands for, and standing firm in that truth, even when no one else is around to see it. This strength is quiet but unshakable. She doesn't bend to societal expectations or the judgments of others because she's fortified herself in the crucible of solitude. And when she steps back into the world, she moves differently, more deliberate, more focused, more determined. She's not just surviving, she's thriving, built up by the strength she cultivated in those precious, solitary moments. In her solitude, she has found her greatest ally. And that strength, it's unstoppable. When a woman chooses solitude, she steps into a space where clarity begins to unfold in ways that are often impossible in the noise of everyday life. In isolation, distractions fall away. The opinions of others, the pressure to perform, and the constant hum of society all fade into the background. And it is in this quiet space that the fog begins to lift, revealing what has been hidden beneath the surface for far too long. Clarity doesn't come from endless conversations or external advice. It comes from sitting alone with her own thoughts and being brave enough to listen. In solitude, she no longer has to filter her decisions through the lens of other people's expectations. Instead, she starts asking herself questions she may have avoided. What do I truly want? What matters to me and me alone? With no one else's voice drowning out her own, the answers become more honest, more authentic. Solitude sharpens her focus. Without the constant demands and obligations pulling her in different directions, she can zero in on her goals with renewed determination. She begins to recognize the difference between what's urgent and what's truly important. The time spent alone helps her sift through the clutter and pinpoint the things that align with her values and purpose. It's not just about finding clarity in her next steps. It's about finding clarity in who she is at her core. Isolation also allows her to reflect on her past decisions and experiences without judgment or shame. There's no audience, no need to explain or justify. In that stillness, she sees the lessons hidden in her mistakes and the strength she gained from her struggles. This reflection doesn't weaken her. It empowers her with a deeper understanding of how far she's come and where she's headed next. Through solitude, she gains the gift of perspective. She can see the bigger picture, untangling the knots of confusion that once held her back. And when she re-enters the world, she does so with a mind that is clear, a heart that is steady, and a purpose that is undeniable. The power of isolation isn't in the silence itself. It's in the clarity it reveals and the transformation it makes possible. When a woman chooses solitude, she steps into a powerful journey of mastering self-love and independence. In the quiet, away from the opinions and influences of the world, she learns to become her own source of validation. She no longer seeks approval from others because, in solitude, she realizes that her worth has always been intrinsic. It was never dependent on how she was perceived, praised, or judged. In this space, she starts to see herself clearly, flaws, strengths, and everything in between. And instead of criticizing or hiding from those imperfections, she begins to embrace them with compassion. Self-love isn't just about acknowledging the things she likes about herself. It's about accepting every part of her being with grace. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, I am enough just as I am. This acceptance is liberating. It frees her from the exhausting cycle of chasing perfection and instead allows her to grow into the fullest, most authentic version of herself. Solitude also teaches her to meet her own emotional needs. When she sits with herself in times of vulnerability, she discovers that she doesn't need anyone else to soothe her fears or boost her confidence. She learns how to comfort herself, encourage herself, and show up for herself in ways that others may never have been able to do. This independence doesn't come from isolation alone. It comes from learning to be her own strongest ally, her own safe haven. As she masters self-love, she also begins to step into independence with a newfound confidence. No longer afraid of being alone, she discovers the power of standing on her own 2 feet. She doesn't wait for someone to rescue her or provide her with opportunities. Instead, she takes control of her life, sets her own boundaries, and makes choices that honor her truth. She moves through life with a sense of self-assuredness, knowing that she is capable of navigating whatever comes her way. This independence is not built on bitterness or pride, it's built on love. The love she has cultivated for herself creates a solid foundation that no rejection, disappointment, or challenge can shake. And from this place of self-love and independence, she is free to connect with others, not out of need or dependency, but out of choice, respect, and mutual growth. Choosing solitude has allowed her to discover the deepest kind of love, the love that comes from within. And with that love, she is unstoppable. When a woman chooses solitude, she steps into a space where she can finally hear herself without interruption. In the world's constant noise, her voice may have been drowned out by expectations, opinions, and societal pressures. But in the stillness, something remarkable begins to happen. Her voice, which may have been a whisper for so long, begins to grow stronger. Solitude gives her the space to explore what she truly thinks, feels, and believes, without needing to cater to anyone else's demands. In the quiet, she begins to recognize the difference between what the world has told her to be and who she genuinely is. She no longer feels the need to parrot the thoughts and beliefs of others just to fit in or be accepted. Instead, she becomes more in tune with her authentic self, the self that doesn't need to be polished or filtered to be worthy. And as she listens closely, she discovers that her voice is not just valid, it is powerful. This journey of finding her voice is not always easy. At first, it may feel foreign to speak her truth, especially if she's spent years being silenced or ignored. But solitude is where she can practice. She can speak her mind, even if no one is there to listen, and feel the weight of those words land in her own heart. Over time, what starts as a hesitant expression becomes a bold declaration. She no longer shrinks back from uncomfortable truths or difficult conversations. Instead, she begins to stand tall in her beliefs, knowing that her voice matters simply because it is hers. In solitude, she also becomes more intentional with her words. She's no longer speaking just to be heard or to fill the silence. Every word she chooses carries purpose, rooted in her own truth, and not in the need to please or impress others. And when she finally steps back into the world, she brings that clarity with her. Her voice becomes a reflection of the strength she has cultivated in isolation, a strength that commands respect without ever raising its volume. Finding her voice doesn't mean she has to be loud or forceful. It simply means she knows who she is and what she stands for. And because she has found that voice in solitude, it's a voice that no one can take away. It's steady, unapologetic, and deeply rooted in self-awareness. In choosing solitude, she hasn't just found her voice, she's found her power. When a woman chooses solitude, she makes a conscious decision to redefine what loneliness means. The world often views being alone as a weakness, a sign of isolation, sadness, or even failure. But when she takes control of her solitude, she transforms what could have been loneliness into an undeniable source of power. Instead of allowing emptiness to consume her, she turns inward and taps into a strength that only emerges in the quiet. In moments of loneliness, emotions rise to the surface. There may be feelings of abandonment, fear, or vulnerability, but rather than running from these emotions, she chooses to sit with them. She acknowledges her pain, her unmet desires, and her disappointments with honesty and compassion. And through this self-awareness, she begins to see that loneliness is not a punishment. It's an invitation to heal. It's a space where she can process the past, release what no longer serves her, and step into a version of herself that is stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Loneliness also becomes an opportunity for self-discovery. In solitude, she begins to explore her passions, dreams, and interests on a deeper level. She tries new things, sets new goals, and learns more about what excites and fulfills her. This self-exploration fuels her independence. She no longer waits for someone else to bring her happiness. She creates her own. And in doing so, she turns what once felt like emptiness into a wellspring of creativity and empowerment. Solitude also shifts her perspective on relationships. When she's alone, she learns to enjoy her own company, to appreciate her own thoughts and ideas. She stops seeking companionship out of desperation and instead sets higher standards for the people she allows into her life. She no longer fears being alone because she knows her worth, and that confidence, born out of solitude, radiates from her in every interaction. She's no longer dependent on others to complete her. She's whole, on her own. Turning loneliness into power doesn't mean she doesn't acknowledge the difficult moments. It means she transforms those moments into fuel for growth. Every tear, every long night spent reflecting, every challenge she faces in solitude becomes a stepping stone toward a more empowered, fulfilled life. She no longer waits for someone to rescue her from her loneliness because she has rescued herself. This transformation is profound. The same woman who once felt small in her solitude now stands tall, rooted in her strength. She's no longer afraid of being alone because she knows that solitude is where her power is born. And when she steps back into the world, she carries that power with her. Unshakable, undeniable, and entirely her own. When a woman chooses solitude, the impact doesn't stop with her. The strength, clarity, and confidence she cultivates in that sacred space ripple outwards, touching every aspect of her life and everyone she encounters. Solitude is often seen as a private journey, but its effects extend far beyond her own inner transformation. The woman who has found power in her solitude moves through the world with a presence that is deeply felt, even without words. The first ripple is self-mastery. When she emerges from solitude, she carries herself with a calmness and assurance that others notice. There's no longer a frantic need to please or perform. She no longer reacts to the chaos around her because she has learned how to ground herself in stillness. Her decisions become more intentional, her actions more purposeful, and her life more aligned with her true self. And that self-mastery creates a magnetic energy. People are drawn to her because they sense her strength, the kind of strength that can't be faked or borrowed. Her relationships also begin to shift. She no longer settles for shallow connections or one-sided partnerships. Solitude has taught her how to nurture herself, so she no longer seeks relationships to fill a void. Instead, she seeks connections that are rooted in mutual respect, growth, and understanding. And because she knows how to love and honor herself, she inspires others to do the same. Her boundaries are firm yet compassionate, and her authenticity gives others permission to show up fully as themselves. Her creativity is another ripple that flows from solitude. In those quiet moments, she may have discovered talents and passions she never knew existed. Maybe she began writing, painting, or dreaming up a new business. Solitude gave her the space to let her imagination roam freely without judgment or limitation. And when she brings those creative gifts into the world, she inspires others to tap into their own potential. Her courage to follow her dreams becomes a beacon for those who may still be searching for theirs. Even her leadership takes on a new dimension. Whether she's leading in her family, her community, or her workplace, she does so with a wisdom born from reflection. She's not driven by ego or the need to control. Instead, she leads with empathy, insight, and vision, qualities that were strengthened in the quiet moments of self-discovery. Others see her as a guide, someone who can weather life's storms with grace because she has faced her own inner battles and emerged victorious. The most profound ripple, however, is the legacy she leaves behind. The woman who has embraced solitude has learned to live life on her own terms. She becomes a role model, not because she's perfect, but because she's real. Her journey from isolation to empowerment serves as a powerful testament to what's possible when a woman chooses herself. And that example, that unshakable presence, will continue to inspire long after she's gone. Solitude, when chosen and embraced, is not just a personal act. It's a transformative force. Its ripples move through every aspect of her life, creating waves of strength, authenticity, and inspiration that touch everyone around her. And the beauty of those ripples is this: they never stop. The power of a woman who chooses solitude. When a woman chooses solitude, she is not retreating, she is advancing. She is stepping into a sacred space where her strength is forged, her clarity is sharpened, and her voice is found. In those moments of stillness, she discovers the power that has always been within her. She confronts her fears, faces her doubts, and breaks free from the need for external validation. Solitude becomes the crucible where she transforms weakness into resilience and uncertainty into purpose. This is a woman who doesn't shy away from her own reflection. Instead, she looks herself in the eye and says, "I am enough. I am worthy. I am powerful." And in that declaration, she becomes unshakable. She doesn't wait for the world to tell her who she is. She defines herself by herself. Her power is no longer contingent on what others think or say. It is born from a deep, unbreakable love for the person she sees in the mirror. Through solitude, she gains clarity, clarity that the noise of the world once drowned out. Her goals, her dreams, her values all become crystal clear when she silences the voices of doubt and distraction. She now moves with intention and purpose, no longer scattered by other people's agendas. She knows where she's going, and she refuses to be derailed. And in finding her voice, she no longer hesitates to speak her truth. It may have been a whisper once, but in solitude, she learned to listen, nurture, and trust it. Now her voice is steady, unapologetic, and undeniable. She stands tall in her convictions, not because she needs to be heard, but because she has learned to hear herself. And that kind of confidence doesn't fade, it radiates. Loneliness may have knocked on her door, but she transformed it. She turned the ache of being alone into an opportunity for healing, growth, and empowerment. She became the source of her own happiness, her own peace, her own fulfillment. And in doing so, she stepped into her full, limitless potential. But her journey doesn't stop there. The power she found in solitude doesn't just stay within her, it ripples outward. Her strength becomes a beacon for others. Her clarity inspires those who are still searching. Her voice encourages others to speak up, and her confidence shows that there is nothing more powerful than a woman who has discovered her worth. She becomes a force of nature, steady, grounded, and unstoppable. So when a woman chooses solitude, she chooses transformation. She chooses to become her own source of strength, love, and wisdom. And when she steps back into the world, she doesn't just take up space, she commands it. She is proof that power is not found in others. It is cultivated in the stillness, nurtured in the quiet, and unleashed when a woman decides to embrace her own solitude. And when she does, there is no limit to what she can become.